Hi, everyone. Dr. Butler here, and I'm here with Cody Liner. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. He's currently the coordinator for the Beach National Team Development Program at USA Volleyball. So, thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk with us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah. So my name is Cody Liner. Like Dr. Butler said, I'm originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. And then I went to school at the University of Tampa, which is where Dr. Butler and I met. Um, and then she left us, unfortunately. But I graduated from there in 2017 with my major, bachelor's in sport management, minor in marketing. And then I continued on and got my MBA from UT as well. And then throughout my time being at UT, I was a student assistant, graduate assistant for the volleyball program. Was fortunate to win two national championships there. And then while I was also there, I worked alongside the sports commission on multiple roles. So got to intern with the 2016 Frozen Four and the 2017 College Football National Championship, and then worked alongside them for NHL All Star, a couple of their amateur events that they run, as well as some other fun events. And then most recently was a grad assistant for the Women's Final Four in 2019, and then uh, was a creative specialist for the Super Bowl host committee for Super Bowl 55, which is in Tampa. So the COVID Super Bowl that it will be known as. And now I recently just took a job as the coordinator of the Beach National Team Development Program for USA Volleyball. So basically, what that is working on the national pipeline from anything athletes U23 and under, and how they fall into our pipeline, and how they get to that next level in terms of like being on the senior national teams and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Working remotely. So yeah.
That's awesome. So Cody is what you call the ideal student. He didn't just go to class, he went to class, he worked with the athletic department, and then he also had other things he was doing as he outlined, and he's been able to really pave the way for himself. So I follow him on LinkedIn, on social media, and I'm always just so excited when I see what you're up to because I feel like you have just done the gamut with sports and there's just so much in
Yeah.
front of you, and that's so exciting. So again,
Yeah.
I appreciate you just taking the time out. I mean, I feel inspired already. So I'm excited about this
No,
interview.
I love doing this. This is awesome. I love being able to do it. So it's great.
So, I mean, you told us a little bit about what you've been up to, but how did you come to be in this position specifically? Like, how were you able to network, meet people, all of that, and your skills and your qualifications? How do they get you ready for this current position?
I think with this current position, it's an interesting timeline. I mean, I knew my contract was running out with the Super Bowl host committee. So at that point, you're trying to secure something for after that, and like what that looks like. It was actually I really wasn't looking for a job at the time. I had told myself that I was gonna like take some time off after work because it was just a lot to deal with in terms of the Super Bowl. Which I think a lot of our staff was like, we're taking like 2 months off. um, but no, this position came up. A friend of mine actually sent it to me, and then I was like one of those like, oh, I'll apply to it. Like, why not? I think it would be really stupid to not apply to it because my background is in volleyball. I came from volleyball um, life in terms of like growing up and stuff like that. But I think what helped me secure this position is just all of my past experiences in terms of like what I can bring to the table, but then also being willing to learn a new role. So yeah, that's how it kind of came up. Um, it was interesting. I was interviewing during Super Bowl at the time. So interviewing leading up to like the 2 weeks that we had to run events and stuff like that. And during that whole interview process, I had interviewed, I think like the week before that we actually started running events, and then the week after. So I told them, I was like, hey, like FYI, like I'm gonna have to take a week off of this whole like interview process, and they were totally cool with it. They totally understood. Just constantly checked in with them, and um, actually interviewed on the day that the Bucks parade was, so that was interesting. So, but yeah, no, that's how this position came about. It was one that I felt like it would be stupid to not apply to. It was kind of just great timing.
Okay.
Very fortunate. Um, they had gone through a lot of layoffs at the beginning of COVID, and this whole national team development program that they now call it, it's a brand new department per se. They've rebranded what they used to call high performance. So they were hiring new staff, and on the beach side, they were hiring one position, and so applied to it, and the rest is history. So yeah,
Very, very
very
nice.
fortunate with the timing. So yeah.
Very nice, very nice. So I'm actually going to just skip around a little bit. I'm going to ask you some more questions about your current job. So what does an average week look like at your current job?
Yeah, so I would say an average week, especially working remotely, which as of right now, we all are working remote. Some people can go into the office if they want to. Our office is in Colorado Springs, and I'm still in Tampa, so I get to work remote the whole time. But it's a lot of meetings, a lot of planning. But I would say my current week, um, as of right now, we're in our busy season, as we would say. So not only are we planning and trying to structure what this program looks like for the future moving on in terms of like what our long-term goals are and what our short-term goals are and how we're perceived throughout the USA volleyball network per se. So how we perceive it with regions and clubs and all of that. But we're also dealing with athletes. So we're working on me personally, I'm working on depth charts in terms of who falls into our pipeline and who falls out of our pipeline, watching video constantly. So we have a scouting network of about like 50 coaches in terms that's including men's and women's side. um, they'll provide us with names of athletes, and then it's our job to go and research them, ask our scouting network about them a little bit, and then from there, run with it and see where athletes fall in the pipeline. So there's a lot of that. But then as of right now, we're also planning for our beach collegiate national team training block. So we're working with our collegiate athletes that are looking towards that next level, that have already passed like their amateur level. And then we're also planning U19 trials and U21 trials. So for our national teams, we don't necessarily just select athletes. We run a trial, which is like a tournament format. So we're planning that because we have a world championship for both age groups in Thailand in September. So we're planning events. We're planning for the future in terms of our department, and then we're constantly networking and figuring out, what certain aspects we want to take from athletes and how do we want to help them. So we're building a program while also running a program. So the way I like to say it is we're flying a plane while also building it. So
Okay. A lot going on, a lot of multitasking. So,
yeah, yeah,
so you are a national governing body of an NGB of the USOC, the United States Olympic Committee, correct?
yes, yep.
Okay. And will you have to go to Colorado Springs at one point or no?
So as of right now, the plan is to go out there in August and help be with the team there. We don't work out of the actual campus in terms of the USOPC, um, but we are like 10 minutes down the road. So we have a brick and mortar office that I think we're planning on going back to in August. And from there, um, we'll travel and we'll work together as a team. Our department specifically travels a lot. So come June, I'll be traveling. So like I'll be gone the last 9 days of June. I'll be gone the first 10 days of July, the last 10 days of July, a week in August, and then I'll be home for a week in September, to put it
Okay.
down. So I'm
Okay.
traveling the rest of September. Um, So, it'll be going out to Colorado Springs, which will be interesting. But yeah, we don't really use the USOPC campus that much. But a lot of our headquarters, in terms of a lot of the NGBs, are out there in Colorado Springs.
Very cool, very cool. And thank you for saying that. I made a mistake. I said USOC, but it's USOPC now because it's Olympic and Paralympic
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yes, and for those of you that don't know, this is an amazing opportunity for you, Cody. I mean, just getting that, getting that opportunity to work for an NGB of the USOPC. And we have 3 campuses here in the US, right? Chula Vista, Lake Placid, and then Colorado Springs, which is the main one. So very,
Yeah.
very cool. And you'll love Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. I'm excited for um, a different side of the country. I've been a beach kid my whole life, so the mountains will be somewhat different, but I'm excited. I'm an adventurous person, so
Very, very cool. So this is kind of off
yeah.
script, but what's up with Tokyo? Like, how are you all navigating that and all of that? Is that part of
I will say we're fortunate that we don't have to be handling much of it,
it?
but we've been on some calls with our director of beach volleyball programming, and he said, it's kind of like how Super Bowl was. Like the plans are constantly evolving because every day we learn something new. Um, as of right now, if they come from a certain part of, not even if they come from the US, if they come from a certain part of the US, our athletes, they have to quarantine for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
So, but then you consider who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, and how that process goes. All of the site visits that normally you would have a site visit that your director or someone would go over and they would see like the campus and the lodging and how travel is going to be and stuff like that. All of that is being done virtually. So no one has actually stepped foot in Tokyo yet. So there's a lot of virtual meetings going on. Um, but yeah, so there's a couple athletes that if they come from Florida, they may actually have to quarantine for a little longer than other athletes. So that's a little bit of some navigation. But yeah, everything's on track for Tokyo. Our women's national team and men's national team are actually in Italy right now for VNL, which is basically the World Championships for indoor. And then beach is actually in Sochi right now at their last qualifier or second to last qualifier for the Olympics. So the way the Olympics work for the beach side is there's no really like team selection or athlete selection. It's based off of points in terms of qualifying. So, but yeah, Tokyo will be interesting. Yeah, again, it's ever evolving. But the plan is everything's in the works. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And thank you for sharing. So my next
Yeah.
question to you, what do you enjoy most about your current job?
Um, I would say it's kind of dual fold. So not only are we working with athletes to get them in the pipeline and try to navigate their way to being like part of our senior national teams, but it's also helping grow the sport at the same time. So we actually, with our new department, we're actually running a USAV play camp, which is a brand new camp that USAV is doing. And it's not necessarily for beginners, but it's for beginners and it's also for all experience levels. But what it's doing is it's helping us grow the sport in terms of a middle school age and under demographic.
Oh,
Um, so we're helping plan that, and that camp is actually going to travel across the country. So we're going to be able to touch different athlete points in terms of where they are demographically or geographically. But yeah, I think it's working with the younger athletes to grow the sport, but then it's also working with athletes and seeing how they progress in terms of reaching their goals and their dreams that they want to accomplish. Because as a young kid, you can always have that goal of competing for USA and having the American flag. Um, when you get to that senior level, and even when you're in a youth level, I think making kids dreams come true and seeing their goals come to fruition is, I think, what definitely is the highlight of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you all are doing so much for youth sport and sport for development.
Yeah.
So on the other side of that coin, what is the toughest part of your current job?
I think the toughest part is being a brand new department. And me coming in the role that I came in, I'm kind of coming in the middle of the whole startup of it. So I'm having to learn and play catch up on what they've already, to the points that they've already gotten to. But then also trying to not only do my regular job and, keep events going and navigate that and planning, but also trying to figure out like what our future looks like and then also trying to play catch up.
Okay.
um I think it's a lot, so it's like drinking out of a fire hose at times. But it's good. I mean, every day is learning something new. It's kind of, you go through a 2-week onboarding process, but at the same time you don't really know like what you don't know until you're actually thrown into it. um So I think that's a lot. There are times where we're like having to put band-aids on stuff and move forward and say, okay, we're going to come back to that like after our busy season, just because we are so busy in terms of like inviting athletes to our training series, and which actually does take up a lot of time. So yeah, I would say that's the, I mean, that's probably the hardest part about our job right now is navigating building a program and still doing our like daily work that needs to get done as well. So you're not only are you focusing on short term, but you're also like heavily focusing on your long term as well, because there's not necessarily a blueprint to what we're doing. We're building that blueprint as we go. So
Yeah, and then you also talked about just the impact of COVID-19, so it'll probably look a lot different next year than it looks like now. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. So
yeah,
I'm going to backtrack a little bit because, when I was in Tampa and all the cool things you were doing, you actually came to my class and you talked to them in person, which was
yeah.
wonderful. So can you tell me a little bit about your time with the Tampa Bay Sports Commission and then just pivot off that as the creative specialist for the Tampa Bay Super Bowl and how that worked out with working with the host committee and all that?
Yeah. So I'll just start from the beginning. So I volunteered. So my time with the Sports Commission started with volunteering for the 2015 Women's Final Four. So when professors say like make sure you volunteer, it's really important, because that was actually my foot in the door. And it was interesting because I just didn't volunteer for positions that I thought would be like the most enjoyable and be outside and be in the action. Um, I think where I got my foot in the door was actually volunteering for the most boring position out there, and it was command center. And all we did was sit there, and we were basically a runner. Whenever they needed something, we would go and do it. But you got to sit there and you got to know like each of the staff members, and which was good. And then from there, uh, they were looking for an intern for college football, for the 2017 college football playoff national championship, just because of how heavy that project is. So they were looking to expand their staff for that short term. So I got to hop on and learn from like an administrative role for 2016 NCAA Frozen Four, and then work on multiple sides in terms of learning a lot from our marketing and then also from an event planning standpoint, but then also being this gopher that could help out wherever needed, which was great in terms of being so young and learning just the whole gamut of running an event. You got to see every side of it. And then from there, they asked me to come help out with other events that they were running. So I got to come on for like 2 weeks and help out with the NHL All Star game that came, and that was during Gasparilla. So I got to help out there, and again, learned from, helped and assist on like an event standpoint, event logistics. So wherever they needed help was basically where I stepped in. And then from there, they offered me a graduate assistantship for the 2019 Women's Final Four. And I went into it totally working on like an event logistics side. So helping from an ancillary events perspective. Um, So they have this event called Bounce, and it's 2,000 kids that get a basketball and they bounce from one point A to point B throughout downtown. And so I got to take that event and run with it, which is great. So I got kind of thrown into the fire, and that's where I got to show off what I've learned from being a volunteer to that point. And then I also had graphic design experience coming in from teaching myself through being a student assistant at UT. We started social while I was there, so I kind of had to teach myself some Photoshop, Adobe Creative Cloud skills, and they asked me to assist on a graphics side. So I was running my event and then helping run our concert that was in Curtis Hickson, and then while also doing graphics for the women's Final Four as well from a LOC standpoint. And then they saw what I could do, and from there they offered me the position of creative specialist with the Super Bowl host committee, which was a little daunting. It was a little nerve wracking, but it was good. I'm glad I took the chance on it because I learned a lot about myself. Because it was a heavy task. It was me sitting there, working with our agency to help create a logo for a host committee, but then also taking that logo and building what our brand looked like and how it would be perceived from not only our host committee, but how it would be perceived from a local municipality standpoint, from all the stakeholders involved. So not only are you like representing your host committee, but you're also representing like the community that is in Tampa Bay. And from there, like I got to, work with our marketing department, but then I also got to have like my hand in like other departments and learning what they were doing while also working on the graphic side and the creative side. So from a creative specialty standpoint, I was running our social. So all of our social media channels, and then working with our marketing department and all the other departments in terms of how we were marketing certain things. So from our legacy, social impact, so Forever 55, which is our social legacy, and then from Business Connect to just our ancillary events in general and volunteers. But it was great. I think the greatest thing I think about it and how I describe it to people is like I got to be a part of like telling the story of the whole planning process of the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. And to think, okay, yeah, Super Bowl is huge. So like getting to help tell that story, but to do it in the year that we had from, COVID standpoint and everyone rebounding from COVID, but just everything else that went into that year from, a DEI standpoint, diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, I think it really opened my eyes to, how can we expand this story? And our team was so great. We were actually a team of 13 that normally has on a host committee that normally has like 30 to 45 people. So we were definitely all having to pick up and just take on tasks that none of us would normally be defined to take. But I wouldn't trade the experience for anything because we got to experience so much. But yeah, that's basically how it was from a creative standpoint. And then running social during and throughout the whole Super Bowl week. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for, telling us all about that. I mean, I just think it's so amazing how you taught yourself skills in addition to just acquiring some skills along the way. So everything from graphic design to social media, and then all the tasks that were just thrown your way from, the expectation of having a team of 30 plus 40, right? To
Yeah.
13. So, I mean, that just says a lot about you. But I mean, obviously, you've earned your position where you are now, and they're lucky to have you because you have so many, what do I call it, tools in your toolkit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great because now the position that I'm in, you know, I'll get thrown stuff in terms of like, hey Cody, can you look at this press release? Hey Cody, like help us on social. So yeah, and it's good from having that event background because we are running events, even though we aren't an event department. We still are out there running some kinds of events. So to have background in uh, different areas definitely helps. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for talking about the legacy, because we do talk about that in class and legacy impact and what that means and how you're going to remember an event. And I have a very positive memories of the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay and just watching it on TV and the fact that the home team was there and everything like that. So from my end and watching it on television, I feel like it ran very smoothly.
Yeah, no, it's great. We actually it did run very smoothly. It was awesome to see just the support from not only the NFL side but the local side. Like all of our locals came out to support. I mean, the Bucks being in it definitely did help. So that was very fortunate. But I do feel like our community helps out so much in terms of like helping put on these events. So yeah.
Very, very nice. So I'm going to ask you, you did bring up DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, I mean, if you just want to tell us a little bit about some of the things your current organization is doing to, address some of these issues, that would be great. Or you did mention also to the Sports Commission and working for them as well. So anything you want to add to that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so I'll start out for Super Bowl. Um, there's an event per se, but it's more of like a legacy initiative that the NFL puts on, but the responsibility goes to the host committee. And what it is it's called Business Connect. But it's for minority owned businesses. So your LGBTQ, your diversity, your racial minorities. It runs a gambit, veteran owned, women owned. Um, so we have an application process, and so all these businesses apply. They have to have a certain certification for it, but it really like puts those businesses that normally wouldn't get those opportunities. It puts them on the map, and it opens them up to being shown off not only from in an NFL working with them standpoint, but also it helps them get put on the map from a like local standpoint. So like locals are learning about that. And what we did is we piggyed back off of that, and we also had a restaurant week, which was for business connect vendors. So they were all minority owned restaurants. So that was great because a lot of the restaurants I haven't heard of, and so you're learning about your community and you're opening up doors to those people that wouldn't necessarily get all of those opportunities. So that was great from a host committee standpoint. And then we also had our legacy initiative that was focused on, underprivileged youth in terms of getting out in the community and being active and like racial inequality and stuff like that. So providing like people that don't have the opportunities tools to further their education, but then also just be present in the community and in terms of education. But then we also focused on environment stuff like that. So our legacy initiative, like from a host community standpoint, focused on a lot. And then you go to USA Volleyball, and we have, as an organization, we've partnered with the SIAC conference, which is a HBCU dominant conference, and to start up men's volleyball at all those universities. So you have 14 universities within that HBCU conference that are now starting up volleyball. And so volleyball is really heavily focusing on not only like its racial minority focus, but also just underprivileged athletes that don't necessarily get the opportunities. So we have that HBCU focus, but then we're also focused on like underprivileged girls through our Starlings program that we've partnered with. And they are focused on providing underprivileged girls an opportunity to play volleyball so they aren't at risk of anything else. So it's kind of like bringing them into the sport while also just providing them something to do. Um, and then from another standpoint, we have a DEI committee, and they're always focused on that. So we have staff that are on there. We have athlete representation, and then that includes our like DEI task force. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Well,
we
it's great to hear.
actually from a beach side, we just held we helped like I guess focus on a HBCU beach invitational tournament. So that was good. So yeah,
Very, very cool. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so happy I
yeah,
asked that question. So we're getting down to the end of this interview. And so these are the last few questions.
yeah.
What advice do you have for current students who would want to pursue a career path, the same one that you have chosen?
Um, I would say not only is it specific to my career path, but I would say, have your passions and, know what your passions are and focus on them and figure out what you can do to, enhance your skill set to advance in that passion, like advance in terms of getting to where you want to. And, um, but I would say expanding your skill set is the most important thing. I'm very fortunate to have the wide experience that I do have in terms of graphic experience, marketing experience, event experience, because I do feel like having all of that, it's kind of like, okay, I have this, I'm missing this, so I'm adding it and I'm working on it. And I feel like that's what's helped me get to where I am today. Like, um, they said they saw my resume and they're like, this may be the guy. And, I do have a feeling, and they've mentioned it like a lot of it comes from like the wide experience that I have. Like I may not have the most experience in marketing or the most experience in events or the most experience in graphic design, but I've been a part of each of those to know kind of like what goes on in each of those departments. And now the next step in terms of like athlete development per se, like I have coaching background, but I'm learning it from a whole nother level. So my number one advice would just to be like, don't be scared to either go for a risk and take a risk and step out of your comfort zone to learn something new and take a different role. Um, I would say embrace the chaos a little bit, embrace learning multiple things, and um, yeah, and just embrace being able to be really diverse in what you can bring to the table.
I like that. Embrace the chaos because
Yeah.
with sporting events, especially this year, right? 2020, 2021, you're just getting everything thrown at you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
being
Yeah, for sure.
optimistic about it is huge. So
Yeah.
thank you for that advice. Okay. And so the next one. So, what should sport management professors like myself be teaching students so that they can better be prepared for a career such as yours?
I think, and this goes back to like my time at UT. I think the best thing that we did at UT was just case studies and getting real life experience with projects. Like I'm a huge project based person, and I feel like that's where you really do get a lot of your learning from because you actually have to put what you learn like into motion. Whether it is a case study or it's a project in general. Like I still remember from our Olympic class, we had to put together an Olympic bid and provide it. And then from our communications class, we had press conferences. And, I feel like all of those classes and having those projects, made you really focus and sit down and, you'll go through your project and actually learn what you don't know and what you do know. And you'll be like, okay, I need to like brush up on this a little bit. So my one advice would just be, embrace the projects and the case studies because again that's where your real life experiential learning does come into play, and that's where you get to utilize it in the real world in terms of internships and getting jobs. You can put those case studies on your resume and you can talk about those projects in an interview, whereas like you aren't necessarily going to talk about your test that you may have done well on or you may have sucked at. I'm not a big test taker, but but having those case studies and projects were great to be able to talk about in interviews.
Okay, great. No, that's good. That's good to know. And real quick question going off that group projects. So you did talk about projects. I mean, not everybody's a big fan, but they do help in the long run, right?
Yeah, they do. You may not enjoy them and you may be like, oh crap, I'm working with someone that I don't necessarily want to work with. But it's like you're gonna take a job someday and you don't know who you're going to be working with. And sometimes you may be working with someone that does the minimum and you're going to have to step up for them. And it really makes you realize, you know, how far are you willing to go for the betterment of the group? Like, how much are you willing to put into it to make sure the group succeeds as a whole? And, you know, you may not necessarily need to get all the credit for it. But like, how do you feel as like a person and individual? Like, whether you're in a group or not, that you like or not, like you're gonna learn a lot about yourself in terms of how much are you willing to put in and take out of projects and group projects in general. So you get out of it what you put into it. So
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for that. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
I remember I was a student, I was like, I hate group projects, but you get in the real world and you're like, they're beneficial. Like you may not feel it, but or see it right away. But in the end, when you like sit there and you reflect on it, you're like, oh yeah, it helps. You know, it makes you a little tougher when you're with a group that doesn't necessarily work hard. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I actually got my first, my not my first, my second internship because of a group project. I was there. Somebody was working for the baseball team at the time, and me and that person, we were the only people that did the work, the group project.
yeah,
So afterwards, he's like, "Hey, do you want to come work with me? You know, at the Reds?" I was like, "Okay, I will submit
fun.
my application." So group projects, I think they definitely show you know, they tell you a lot, like you said, about yourself, and then it's a great way to make connections and meaningful relationships.
Yeah,
And
for
also,
sure.
hey, I don't work well with you. um,
Yeah.
so my last question, do you have anything else you would like to add before you wrap up today?
No, I think the one thing that I would say is, you know, don't be scared of taking a chance in terms of like roles or jobs. You never know what it could lead to. So yeah, again, I would say the the two things that I would say just go back to like my advice, which would be, you know, embrace the chaos, but also um, take the time to learn something new. Um, Especially if you have free time, do it. Like whether it's a certification or sitting there watching YouTube on like how can I learn Photoshop and whatnot, because you never know like what that skill set is going to bring in whenever you're going to have to use it. So yeah, and don't be scared to reach out to people either, um, because everyone is willing to help each other. You know, we're a competitive market, but I think there are a lot of people out there that are willing to help people that leave a good impression on them.
Very nice. No, that's some great advice. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm going to press stop
Yeah,
right now, and yeah, we really appreciate it.
no
So thank
problem.
you.
Loved it. Yeah.